Okay, so now we're getting into the great debate as brought up in your textbook, where a constitution is inaugurated, and yet we see that it wasn't like all of America said, okay, constitution, great. There existed much contention over the constitution. And again, here we're seeing conflict and America trying to resolve what it is going to be. And I would argue what's really fundamental about understanding this time period and the arguments that are made by groups that we'll call the Federalists, which you could really call the pro-constitutionalists, and the anti-Federalists, which as the textbooks pointed out, didn't really like that name, but they were basically those who didn't agree with what they saw in the Constitution. Made a lot of arguments that are actually very similar to what we see today, which is, for example, how much states' rights should really have as opposed to federal. Right? And there's that tension between state laws and federal laws. You had the case where I was living in Santa Cruz, and essentially they didn't basically the city, for example, said, okay, we're going to allow medical marijuana facilities, and the police were essentially encouraged not to do anything about those. But the federal government was still opposed to it. It's a weird crossover, right? Okay, and so sometimes you just see those kind of things now. I mean, the issue of gay marriage was coming across that, and there's this tension that's always there between the rights of the states, of cities, and individuals, as opposed to what the federal government has its rights to do. Okay, and many people who glorify and admire the Constitution now might also simultaneously share many of the reservations that were coming from people who were opposed to the Constitution then. I mean, just for example, if you're looking in your textbook, you talked about the differences between, let's say, James Madison and George Mason. So James Madison was a Federalist. He supported a strong central government. The Anti-Federalists opposed a strong federal government. Well, much of what the Republican Party now, and libertarians in particular, advocate in modern day 21st century politics is not having necessarily a strong central government or less government intervention in people's lives. The Federalists opposed the Bill of Rights as an unnecessary and perhaps even harmful to liberty. Most people probably don't have that view right now, the idea of being opposed to a Bill of Rights. James Madison was doubt the effectiveness of a militia and favored a federal standing army. That was some of the issues that took place with the Shays Rebellion. For the anti-federalists, such as George Mason, he favored a militia and opposed the federal standing army. And you can look down the list and see, these kind of tensions that are there. And it did at times get to a kind of violent societal thing, but it was mainly, as the textbook said, not. And essentially that resolution, there was a discussion of this in the Federalist Papers, which you may not find to be an exciting read, but it's an important one, which is why I wanted you to at least be exposed to some of the arguments that were being made here, which was basically the advocacy of the importance of the Constitution. Okay, so if you're interested in U.S. history and thinking about the importance of the U.S. Constitution and all these things, the Federalist Papers are highly important and valuable to read. Okay, so just thought I'd point that out. Now, what we're going to get to kind of appease a lot of this issues or an attempt to, which is the U.S. Bill of Rights. And these are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution that we see. Okay, that are going to guarantee certain things that maybe certain people felt that wasn't absolutely guaranteed before. So you have freedom of speech, religion, press, petition of assembly. I think we all consider that a very fundamentally American thing. The right to bear arms and militia, the Second Amendment. This is something that I'm drawing into our discussion. Okay, but as you look, when you see the Constitution, I wish it was as straightforward as right to bear arms and militia. There's a lot of commas there, and the language is a little bit vague in context to what right to bear arms means in context to militia. Okay, then there was the issue of quartering soldiers, warrants and searches, individual debt and double jeopardy, speedy trial, witness and accusations, right for a jury trial, bails and fines. Okay, that law had to not be arbitrary. And I think this is something that's very fundamental. And now this goes back to what I was bringing up with the assassination of U.S. citizens that are accused of terrorism. Is that, people want to know that the law operates in a way that it's just not this arbitrary thing where the state can say, oh, I don't like you for X, Y, or Z reasons or your political opinions, and then that's that. And does that happen in American politics from time to time? The argument is yes, but there's always that debate in those moments as to how it correlates with the entire package of the Constitution. Now, anyhow, moving on to just say, the Bill of Rights, the U.S. Bill of Rights. Remember I always talk about us being a continuation of a European project. The U.S. Bill of Rights has many similarities with the English Bill of Rights. Okay, and we shouldn't forget that even though our state, our Constitution, does unique things, and definitely I don't want to take away from its uniqueness, the concept of a democratic republic, openly they admitted, came from Greece and Rome, which was a part of what European thinkers were discussing. And despite the fact that Britain had a king, Parliament was still a big deal, and there already was this idea of rights and having a republic, but not in the way that it was maybe clarified in the United States. And so I just want to even take example the Second Amendment. This is what the Second Amendment says. A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed. So by the way, I just want you to point out, the Second Amendment is not as clear as you would think in the sense of, are we talking about rights to bear arms in context to the militia, or the idea of just why is it worded in that way? Those comments, I have a friend, he's a lawyer, and he has a master's in English, and he says the sentence grammatically doesn't work these days. This is very vague, and so you have to really kind of look through a lot of things to see the full implications. Now, for the British Bill of Rights, it said that the subjects which are Protestants may have arms for their defense suitable to their conditions and is allowed by law. That is basically saying, if it's allowed by law, and if you're a Protestant, you're allowed to. That's not by any means an NRA-friendly version of the right to bear arms, but it's something there in that, addressing that. And then you can look at these other amendments. I mean, the idea of trials here, just go down. Here, excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. Right? Here we are. The debate about torture. That's also a debate in America right now. Waterboarding, that kind of stuff. Over here, Bill of Rights. That excessive bail ought not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. That's from 1689. Okay? So I just thought that I would point those out. Now, we're eventually going to get this debate over that the Federalists have, and these Bill of Rights are going to basically get solidified into us moving forward and having a president of a constitutional country, and our first president to basically implement the Constitution as a reality that is linked to a state is going to be George Washington. And we'll go into this in the next lecture.